Fire for your mind. Kosher clinician.
Just kidding. Women, monk.
I swear, black women give white men no rules at all.
You're taking my hand, leading the way, stay in the night. Looking at you, making your moves, there is no silence.
Okay, here's my little 2 cents that nobody asked for. I made a PowerPoint about 4 categories of black women that date white men. Okay, so you guys are real close and personal, so let's go into it. This is the first category. I call this the mixed or suburban black women. This is usually black women that, mixed or grew up around white people. So usually she's very used to dating white men. And the bad wig and the braids, the tuck would fall under this category. So here's another category of black women. I call this the Afro black women. Usually not all these women are African, but they have very Afro features. Like they could come in any size, like very African looking black women. The hairstyle is usually, short, kinky. She looks very Afro. You feel me?
Jan, have you ever been in an interracial relationship?
I don't date Africans or black. Sorry.
You don't like black guys?
It's white or nothing.
Oh shit. Why don't you like African Americans?
I only used to date black men, but then I got tired of just they treat us like differently. Like it's crazy because then they'll go for like the lighter women. So what's wrong with me wanting to be with and see my options?
From my experience, I feel like a lot of black people are so controlling. They're very, very controlling.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you prefer to date Caucasian men. Bam. Why do you prefer?
It works for me. You gain more out of it.
So financially.
Not just financially. You loving somebody that actually is loving you and showing you.
So you saying that white men show more affection?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Way more.
Black men have a hard time. They love us. White men.
It was a week before the 4th of July. A time to reflect on the good and the bad. A time to just get away from the rut and the rigor of being a man and a father. The story goes like this, guys. I decided to go to Washington, D.C. And upon approaching or determining to go to Washington, D.C., of course, anytime you go to a big city, you are met with a lot of resistance from seeing cops down the street, arriving, dealing with the hot, blistering sun of Maryland/DC, and all the shenanigans that's associated with travel. But the story goes like this. As I was in Washington, D.C., I went to D.C. to commemorate and more or less allow my family to see the intricacies of the nation's capital. And the great thing about Washington, D.C., guys, is that it comes with a rich tapestry of diversity. Diversity that's not often seen in some of the regions of the South. And one of the things that I've counted a privilege and an honor to do while I was in Washington, D.C., was having the opportunity to see the historic landmarks, the Smithsonian Museum of Science, and every other artifact or museum associated with the legacy of not only the brilliance and the greatness of America, but the legacies or legacy of our ancestors as it relates to time, as it relates to travel, as it relates to reason. And if you know anything about DC, DC is a very rich culture, a very progressive culture, a culture that sees all types of diversity, from interracial dating to different nationalities, different ethnic origins, different gender and social affiliations, to say the least. But there was a landmark, guys, that I wanted to go to, and I wanted to go to that landmark to reflect the legacy and the struggle of our ancestors. And the landmark, or this historical landmark, or this newfound landmark, was the African American Museum. A museum that more or less highlighted the struggles of our people during this transatlantic slave trade, but also the greatness of this untimely event was to see everything that black men and black women contributed to what we currently the kaleidoscope of black America. As you guys know, that there are some that are celebrators or celebrating being divestors. And me personally, I don't care if a white man and a black woman date. That's between the two of them. And I don't care if a black man or a white woman date. If that's what rocks their boat, more power to them. But there was a situation that left me somewhat baffling. And guys, as I was in the African American Museum, slowly, and I say slowly, I began to encroach up the escalator. And I called this, guys, a Divestors Kiss, because what I'm about to tell you guys will surprise some, but more or less confirm what all others knew. And slowly, as I was about to encroach on the escalator, slowly I was on the escalator going up in a parallel position. And as I was going up slowly on the escalator, I saw two couples. It was a black woman and it was a white man. And guys, you know that some black women love to flex about their love for white Zaddy. I call it a Divestor's tale because many love to flex the love that they have for their white Zaddy or the white man. And I'm not racist by any means. But many times, guys, one could argue that the things that black women, some that are into the divesting,
just
allow.
Kidding. Women, monkeys.
I swear, black women give white men no rules at all.
And of course, some could argue that black men are the same way when it comes down to overweight and obese white women. But that's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is this. Some like to flex their love for bread to try to shame and more or less hurt black men. And once again, it's funny to me because I could personally care less. Because we know, and the men that are listening know, that some white men see black women only as a fetish to be used, marred, disrespected, as you guys saw earlier in the clip. And when you think about the African American Museum and the struggles of our ancestors regarding Jim Crow racism, redlining, the KKK, and many other negative things associated with the dark history of the Americas and its negative implications to the psyche of black men and black women, to have this woman flex was something that I found to be more or less jarring, to say the least. So guys, as I was slowly going up the elevator, our eyes met and filled with that suspenseful look of like, boom, I got you. Slowly, I see this black woman, about 5'2" to 5'3", C3, C4 hair, mildly petite, and she looked at me, and we stared at each other, gazing into each other's eyes. And slowly, and true to her nature for her love and her affirmation of her white Zaddy, she looked at me and she slowly leaned over to kiss her white boyfriend, husband, or what I call white Zaddy. And guys, when you see this kind of foolishness, one could argue that it's a part of the internalization and the minimization of oneself and the need to get validation from white people, or what some would call the residual effect of the Stockholm Syndrome, that not only is this a flex, but this is a way to let you know, and I know, that black men, you're no good. And you know, Sam Cooke, guys, wrote a song as I was in the catacombs of the African American Art Museum. I was at the waterfall. I call it a place of refreshing. And one of the things, guys, we know and understand is that there's a percentage, and I say percentage because I don't know the number, but there's a percentage of black men that are beginning to recuse themselves of not only the hypocrisy associated with some American black women in the West, but they're beginning to recuse themselves because they're beginning to see the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of never being good enough. The hypocrisy of always wanting to control the conversation. The hypocrisy of what's good for me is not good for thee. And the hypocrisy of what so many do as it relates to how black men move. One of the things that's so profound and powerful about the passport movement is this. Black men are beginning to travel. They're beginning to travel to the higher echelons of different continents and societies. And while we know that every man that travels does not always represent the good, just like every woman that travels doesn't represent the good. But we do understand that there's a percentage of black men that are traveling, and they understand that what Sam Cooke said, a change is going to come. Oh, yes, it is. Because all of a sudden now, black men are also moving in a direction that some would perhaps consider divesting. And that divesting is not because they wanted to divest per se. I would say for some, and I say some, but it's because needs drive behaviors. And when a person don't get their requisite needs met, they tend to look for other alternative avenues to get those said needs met. And this is just a moment, guys, of reflection, as I once said as I was in Washington, D.C., to remind you men that you have options, that you have value, that you don't have to minimize your worth, and that you don't have to more or less be a slave or a victim of what some would tell you to do. If you find a woman from any ethnicity that will love you, respect you, and honor you as a man, and that dirty word that was once in the vows, obey you, as it relates to duty, and you put your life on the line for that woman as it relates to duty, then I would say you are definitely a lucky man. It's a great thing, guys, or a great day to live in America. Regardless of all the problems that it have, America is a country where black men, white men, and all different ethnic groups, even though we've come a long way and there's still some vestiges of systemic racism, we can find people that not only not look like us, and we might have a tattered past, but we can find people that can share the same things that we want to share. And just like some will argue that some of our women have been exercising their options for years to aggrandize and show love to white Zaddy, now black men are beginning to say, I'm going to exercise my options too. Have you ever seen, or have you ever been a victim of seeing a black woman kiss a divestor? Did it make you feel some kind of way? Because some would try to shame you guys and say you need therapy. And black men don't need therapy no more than black women need therapy as it relates to the more shallow things. But I would argue that we all need therapy as it relates to the internalization of self-hate and the pathology of thinking that white is better and black is inferior. Because we all know that our ancestors have a very rich history that supersedes the transatlantic slave trade, an ancestry that goes back to the pyramids in Egypt, and also some of the greater kingdoms in Africa that many times were not only forgotten or more or less reduced by intentional means, but it was an opportunity for those that more or less wanted to prove their point about the inferiority of the black man to more or less put us down in a negative position. As I said before, I don't care about what a person do. If you happen to find you a white man that loves you and respects you and is not on anything based on any racialized normative, more power to you. This is the concluding point of a Divestor Kiss. She stared at me and she saw white Zaddy. Are you a slave of the pathology of racism? Are you a slave of self-hate? What say you? Be well.